Good evening. How's everybody? Katie, good to see you. I think I have 3 of my former press people. Katie, Morgan, and is JP here? Yeah. It either means I have a lot of turnover in my organization, or I'm just completely incompetent, or maybe both. It's good to see you all. But speaking of turnover, I'm reminded, I was 70th Secretary of State. Donald Trump was the 45th president. There were a lot more people going through my job than his. And I watched my Twitter account every morning to make sure that I still had mine. You gotta give me credit, right? 5 secretaries of defense, 4 national security advisors, just me. Thanks for the very kind introduction. I appreciate that. You talked about the fact I went to West Point and Harvard Law School. A little political lesson for you all. When you're running for Congress in Kansas, talk about West Point, not Harvard, when you're running. Learned that early on. I thought I'd share 4 or 5 things, then I'm going to open up, talk about just about anything that you'd like to talk about. We've seen these last 8 months go by. It's been hard for some of you. It has been really hard for me to watch, taking this country in a direction that is incomprehensible. I get asked all the time about things and like, can you explain this? And I'm like, no, I can't. I'm so glad that I got a chance to be with you now, not when I was a Secretary of State. My wife would always tell me, I'd be on TV on the Sunday shows or whatever, and she said, Mike, you gotta smile more. And I'd say, honey, I'm talking about like people's lives. The reality is now it's Mike Pompeo Unplugged, so we can have some fun. And I'm with a group of young people who are crushing it here, making money, helping their companies be successful. Same kind of thing I did in Kansas before I lost my mind and ran for Congress. If any of you are thinking about it, breathe twice, then go. I thought I'd start by reminding you that this was a very unique 4 years during the Trump administration. He was a unique president. Everybody's looking at me like, yeah, I got it. I was a pretty unique Secretary of State too. The president called me. It was in late December. So after the election, it was late December, and there was a headline in the Washington Post that had a picture of me and described me as President Trump's most loyal cabinet member. And he called me and said, did you see this? It says you're my most loyal cabinet member. And I said, Mr. President, they did not mean that as a compliment. And you have to love President Trump. He paused for a second. He said, yeah, good point. Sorry I bothered you. And you all, some of you would have lived this. Some of you are experiencing it. Those who were working for me on my communications team saw it every day. The media is never going to cut us any slack. They're never going to give those of us who believe in the Constitution, who are conservative, who are Republicans, they're never going to cut us any slack. Morgan saw it, Katie saw it. We got the tar beat out of us every day. I think it was Katie who walked into me. It was the New York Times had written an article, said I was the worst Secretary of State in history. It's quite a statement, by the way. The very next day, proving how much collusion there is in the lefty media, the Post did the same thing. David Ignatius, I think, said, worst Secretary of State in history. Next morning, I get a call from my son. My son's about 30 years old, and he said, hey, Dad, did you see that thing in the Post? I said, I did. He said, I was doing some research last night, and there's this guy named Elihu Washburn, and he only lasted 11 days. Surely you're better than him. So we started a club called We're Number 2. And I said to a friend the other night, watching this administration, I think it might be number 3 now. We might be moving up a little bit. Someone asked me as I was walking in if I miss it or if I'm just glad I'm out of the pressure cooker. It was all of that for 4 years. First serving as the director of the CIA and then being America's most senior diplomat. There was enormous pressure, a lot of work, but I'll tell you what, I wish I was still there. I wish our team was still there. The show we've watched this week in town, well, the good news is they're going to spend $3.5 million. It's not going to cost you a penny. Apparently it costs 0. The fact that President Biden said it was going to cost 0, I tried that today at Dick's Sporting Goods. He still took my credit card, just in case it didn't cost zero. Look, you all are living this, but we watched what administration who was serious could do. We were accused of being the rubes of the being the barbarians who were going to tear down Washington's institutions. And we did a little bit of that. But these are the folks who want to pack the Supreme Court. These are the people who have said we're not going to have a filibuster. These are the folks who are about to spend what will actually be somewhere in the range of $5 to $5.5 trillion. And in 7 or 8 years, we'll have $45 trillion in debt. The good news is my Social Security check is going to clear, yours won't. It's kind of a good news, bad news. Yeah, I can see everybody's trying to figure out if that was really funny or not. It's I tell my son, Nick, work overtime. Take every hour you can get. Look, we were serious. I had the incredible privilege to serve as your Secretary of State. When I traveled the world, people wanted to see me. They didn't want to see Mike. They wanted to see America's Secretary of State. We do an enormous amount of good all around the world. And we do that. We were unambiguous. I talked about America first everywhere I went. That was shorthand for my responsibility. I've raised my hand 7 times, sworn an oath to the Constitution to protect and defend this country. 7 times. Each time it was this country, right? So putting America first made sense. I told every counterpart that I encountered, I came here today to deliver the goods for the people that I am tasked to represent. And I expect that you're trying to do the same for the people that you represent, your nation. And when we do that, when America shows up, we will make your nation more secure. We'll make your nation more prosperous. You know, President Trump, when he came into office, he didn't know the national security space. He'd been a New York real estate guy, but he taught me an awful lot. When I was a CI director, I briefed him almost every day. And that's unusual. The director usually is up at Langley and there's a trained professional comes to brief the president. You should know I brought a trained professional too. Everybody should rest. I brought a professional intelligence person with me as well. But he would remind me often. I'd talk about military things and who had the best fleet and who had the tactical expertise. And he would say, my Mike, who's got the money? Right? Who's got the money? Who's got the resources, the economic power? And we should all be mindful. Those of you who are working in the private sector should be mindful that it is, in fact, America's economic might that delivers on behalf of the United States. It was so powerful for me. It was so powerful for me. I'd been in business. I'd run 2 small companies. These were blue-collar manufacturing companies. One of them made airplane parts. It was a machine shop. The other did equipment in the oil and gas industry that, by the way, still exists. It's going to exist for another 50 years. John Kerry can go and talk about, unicorns and turbines, but in the end, everybody's going to want their electricity around the world, and to feed the next billion people, you're going to need an awful lot of natural gas for the next 50 years. And I went around the world talking about America's capacity to deliver that. I'll never forget, I was in Nigeria meeting with my then counterpart. And he said, it's all great that you want to run your country on when I have to feed what will be the largest nation on the planet. And we don't even know how to turn the lights on in about 80% of our country today. When I was in Pyongyang, I was very mindful that when I would go into Pyongyang, they wanted to get me out of there before nightfall because they couldn't even keep the lights on in their capital city, let alone for the 25 million people who lived outside of that country. We are so blessed to live here. And speaking of Pyongyang, I'm now the record holder for being with Chairman Kim. The previous record holder was Dennis Rodman. Yeah. It wasn't until my second meeting it wasn't until my second meeting that I passed his record. You have to appreciate this. Anybody an Apprentice fan? Yeah, no, okay, fair enough. So remember, Dennis Rodman's on The Apprentice. We all know who the boss was on The Apprentice. And when I first went to meet Chairman Kim, we'd worked on this for weeks, and I told the president it was on Wednesday. I left on Friday morning. It was Good Friday of 2018, and then came back on Sunday night so that no one would know that I was out of the country. It was, by the way, it's one of the 3 things that didn't leak during 4 years. My wife was very glad that one didn't leak. When I was getting ready to leave, it was on the Wednesday afternoon, I said, Mr. President, I'm leaving Friday morning. I'll be back Sunday night. I'll call you as soon as I get out of North Korean airspace. Right, this is just between you and me, right? Maggie Haberman walks in, don't say anything. And he said, that sounds good. And as I turned to walk out, he said, hey, you need to call Dennis Rodman. And I said, and I was a loyal guy. If he said, call Dennis Rodman, I'm going to call Dennis, right? He said, remember Dennis spent all this time with him. He had coached the North Korean basketball team. And then, while I will do a very poor imitation of Donald Trump imitating Dennis Rodman, I'm gonna give it a shot. It goes about like this. It's President says, yeah, I remember we were on the set one day and a phone rang, and it was his phone number from an international phone. And I hear Dennis say, yeah, man, I'm not coaching your team. You're all really short. You're all really, we always lose. Anyway, there you go. There you go. Yeah, yeah. I'll do 3 shows. There you go. I actually didn't end up calling Dennis Rodman. But we delivered to North Korea, right? I never let the media get to you. Remember when the president does Fire and Fury, My Button's Bigger Than Your Button, Little Rocket Man, you remember the trilogy of tweets? Yeah, I do too. Sunday morning, Chuck Todd, he puts the tweet up as he always did. Yeah, Mike, what do you, Mr. Secretary, what do you think of, Fire and Fury and My Button's Bigger Than Your Button? And I would, the whole mission there was to split President Trump and me, to create a gap between us. And as Secretary of State, if there's a gap between you and the president, you're completely ineffective. If your counterpart, if that president or prime minister doesn't believe you're speaking on their behalf, you're just a dude out driving around, right? I never was going to let that happen. So I'd say, Chuck, here's what we're doing on North Korea, and you could just watch him, right? Start to turn red, and he'd go, no, but the tweet. Never let him get you with the noise. Remember this in your lives, wherever you find yourselves. Don't let the noise drown out the things that really matter. Every day, people ask every day. I had friends who would say, I do not know how you do this. And I would say, I'm America's Secretary of State. Who would dream that someone like me would get a chance to go do this? And so every minute was precious. Every hour that I had to work on the problems all around the world to deliver for you all was something I wasn't going to give up for a second. I wasn't going to let the New York Times or Politico, although I think Morgan and Katie would tell you Politico got me a couple times. But we weren't going to let them stand in the way of the work that we were doing. We made the Middle East historically secure. It's never going to go back to the place it was. The Abraham Accords fell out of the sky, according to the left. No, the result was, it didn't fall out of the sky, it was because we had a theory of the case that said we're going to be good friends with Israel, we're going to go crush the Iranians. When Qasem Soleimani's threatening you, we're going to make sure he doesn't kill you. And when we do that, we're going to build out friends all across the world. Last thought, and then I'll take questions. I get asked 2 questions most of all. First question I get asked most of all is, what's in the UFO files? It's not even close. And as I said when I began tonight, I'll answer almost any question. That's one I can't answer for you. But I'll say this about the UFO files. My son said, you got to read them. I was diligent. I always do what my kid tells me. I read the files. We have bigger problems. The second question I get asked is, what are those bigger problems? We've got an enormous challenge from the Chinese Communist Party. Vladimir Putin's a bad guy. I'm not a big fan of Mullah Baradar and the Taliban, and what the president did in Afghanistan crushes my heart. But the biggest challenge we face is that if we forget that they are all wrong and that we are not a nation in decline, that this is the most exceptional nation in the history of civilization. And the next generation, which you all get told all the time, oh my gosh, they don't like to work, they just, right? You all are going to build the next 245 years of this most exceptional nation. I have great confidence in that. I believe it with all my heart. If we get it right at home, if we are fearless in the way we talk about what we do, if we refuse to give an inch when we are attacked from folks on the left, then we'll be just fine. If we cower, if we cave, if we let the woke folks drive us into silence, then there is real risk. We will beat China, we will beat Russia, we will figure out our way through all of the world's problems if we can figure out how to make sure we teach the right things to the next generation, the one that's behind you in our schools. We quit this silliness that's being taught in so many of them today. If we get that piece right, and we remember that our founders were pretty smart people, and that they gave us a set of principles upon which we can build each and every day, then I have enormous confidence in you and in America. And so with that, I'm happy to take questions. Who's got something? I think we have microphones somewhere. If not, you can just shout it. Yes, sir.
Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for your service and for giving us your time tonight. As you came into the Secretary of State position, did you speak with any of your predecessors? And if you did any of them give you good advice? And did any of them give you lousy advice?
Where to go with that? So when I was nominated to be the CI director, I called every living former director, and they were all great. Did the same thing when I became the nominee to be Secretary of State. You should know Secretary Clinton even took my phone call in spite of the fact that the last time we'd seen each other, I was grilling her about Benghazi. So, it was a little awkward. But she was actually most gracious. I mean that. If you go look at that interview, if you go look at that hearing, I was less gracious that day. And so I feel bad. The best wisdom I got was actually from former Secretary of State Jim Baker. And he actually was really kind. He came out to he said, he called me and said, hey, I want to come talk to you. And I said, oh, I'll come see you. He's in Houston. He said, you're busier than me. Let me come see you. So he came out to Langley and spent 3/4 of a day with me. And I referenced it a little bit earlier. He gave me a handful of things, but the most important one was this central idea that as a Secretary of State, you are executing the president's foreign policy. Right? The Constitution gives him that authority. And as President Trump reminded me often, he got 270 electoral votes. I got 0. Secretary Baker had a more subtle way of putting it. But the reality was you can't create any space. And so and for someone who was in the military, I know chain of command. I know how to make that work. And so I was just diligent about when I traveled, Mr. President, I am headed to the Balkans. I am headed to Eastern Europe. I'm headed to Asia. Here's what I'm going to do. Here are the 6 things I'm going to try to accomplish. I was very clear about what I had my orders when I went. So I was confident if I was sitting across the table from the president in Mexico, telling him, no, you're going to close your border. We're going to execute, remain in Mexico. It is going to happen. I was confident enough that if he challenged me, I'd say, you're welcome to pick up the phone and call the president if you think I've got it wrong. No one ever picked up the phone because they knew that I was working so closely with him. And if you said, what's the best advice, it was that. And I think this translated into all of our jobs. Everything you do, I was clear with the president when I disagreed with him. I was articulate. I was forceful as I could possibly be. I did not win every policy debate, not even close. But when we were done, I was about executing the things he told me to do. And that wisdom from Secretary Baker was really, really good. Yes, he's got a microphone. Here we go.
So after the recent debacle in Afghanistan, what would be your advice for countries like Taiwan that now have an emboldened foreign threat that's breathing down their necks, and they feel that America was kind of weak in response to what happened earlier?
3 thoughts for the good people of Taiwan. First, get ready. I don't know if you've seen what's happened just the last 48 hours. Day before yesterday, our time, 60 Chinese jets crossed the line, conducted a major incursion. I think it was about 30 hours ago, follow on 22 largest consecutive incursions by the Chinese. I hope that the State Department will do more than issue a démarche or a statement. I hope that they will start moving gray ships into the region to be ready and to help and to make clear to the Chinese Communist Party that this is going to be really, really difficult. And I would encourage the Taiwanese to get as close as they can to the administration. There's no doubt that leaders all across the world saw and are watching, continuing to this day, watching Afghanistan, where we still have Americans behind enemy lines. And they think, what on earth is going on in Washington, D.C.? And we lost an enormous amount of credibility. Just like in any relationship, you can get it back. It takes time, and it takes more than words. It takes deeds. You have to demonstrate resolve. I hope that on Taiwan, this administration will find that very resolve. The third thought for them is there are other friends in the region as well. Not just the United States, the Japanese, the South Koreans, the Australians. There are other partners who can help make sure that the Chinese understand that Xi's notion of reunification is ahistorical, and not going to happen.
Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for coming.
Yes, I got you.
Maria Giannopoulos from
Hi, Maria.
Wisconsin. My question to you is,
Sorry about your team today.
Oh, I know, it's brutal.
That's okay. When I walked in, Army was down 21-14 to Ball State. If anybody's got their phone and we won, would you let me know?
We haven't been doing well this season, so I know. But go Badgers. So we all know that cybersecurity is a huge threat to our nation. What is something that our government can do to curb our adversaries? And then what can we do as citizens to also curb that threat?
Yeah. Three thoughts on cybersecurity. One, as citizens, look, we all have to do the best we can to keep our own systems secure, not to do silly things online. I would advise you, and I know this is controversial, I would advise you, if you're on TikTok, throw your phone in the Potomac on the way out. You'll have less of the things you don't want some communist Chinese guy to know about you. So we all have that responsibility. And businesses the same way. They've got to do the things that they can. But these are nation-state actors. In the end, government's got to provide the defensive mechanism. The single most important thing we can do is make sure that we impose costs for those cyber actors. And it is difficult, but not as hard as we make it seem. I worked on this a lot as CI director. We have a deep strategy about how to prevent nuclear war, right? We have a counterstrike strategy. We have a cost imposition strategy. We have communicated that very clearly. And so we have established a reasonably good level of deterrence. We can do the same thing in cyberspace. It's newer, it's different. It is also different than a nuclear weapon, a missile at least, which is that you can do cyber, and attribution is trickier. But really smart people that work in a lot of these places that are handling American cyber defense. And what they need is political leaders who are prepared to accept the notion that the difference between a kinetic action and a cyber action is just the size of the molecule, right? It's just the nature. It's still physics. And we ought to treat those attacks, right? They closed down Southeast pipelines in the United States of America, and maybe we responded, and I don't know. I hope so. I haven't seen any public evidence of that. But if you don't, if you lay down for it, if you allow these things to continue, if you allow the North Koreans to conduct ransomware campaigns, and the advice that comes from the United States government is to pay to get free from that, you are going to encourage this. I'll give no more real example than, it's not particularly cyber, but there's a woman who was the CFO of Huawei. She's actually the daughter of the founder. And we had indicted her. The Canadians were holding her, and the Chinese took 2 hostages. The Chinese were working diligently. The Canadians wanted their 2 folks out. We were working hard to try and get these 2 guys out. The Biden administration basically just caved. Basically just, they made her say, "Mother, may I?" And once she said, "Mother, may I," the Chinese Communist Party person who was stealing secrets and having violated the Iranian sanctions, she went home, and then shortly thereafter, the Canadians got their folks back. If any of you travel to China, you should be deeply mindful. They are prepared to take American hostages to get what they need. In that sense, they're no different than the Iranians. This is the same model. If you have something you need from the United States, grab a couple of Americans, throw them in Evin prison, and eventually, it may take years, the Americans will give you something that you want. The Chinese are now in that same model. Remember too, this is the China that's now killed 3 million people. Okay? I was going to wear my mask out here now. I was going to do my Joe Biden impression, but I decided not to. We should be mindful. These are serious people who don't value human life. And when it comes to cyber, most of those actors fall into the same bucket. They don't give a darn if their actions cause enormous pain and agony and kill Americans. We have to respond in a way that protects us. Thanks. I think I got you. Yes, sir. That's all good.
Europe has very recently, started having very serious energy security issues. What do you think we as Americans should be doing, both in terms of providing energy security and countering Russia?
Oh my gosh, I'd love to give you a long answer, but the short one's really easy. We should be selling this stuff to them. We have it in the ground. I mean, it's crazy. It is absolutely crazy. It is crazy that Jake Sullivan gets sent to Saudi Arabia to beg the Saudis to produce oil, and we are shutting down our ability to sell and create jobs and wealth and prosperity for the United States and an enormous amount of security. There was no more important tool. I didn't go to half a dozen of my couple hundred meetings with foreign leaders where energy wasn't at or near the top of the list of things they wanted the United States to help them with. Look, Europe has capitulated. It's folded its tent. They've decided they're going to go green on everything. They're going to suffer a lot of pain, and Europeans are going to pay a whole lot of money for electricity, and that's great because we can sell them stuff that'll make that'll generate electricity for them and make a whole lot of money. And I love my European friends, but they are just silly. And right, I mean, on this issue. Boy, how quickly does the diplomacy leave, you know? You just, 8 months and I can't even do it anymore. Look, so we have the capacity to be a massive energy exporter. We ought to do that. We can help them. And we'd worked really hard to make sure that the Russians weren't selling their product into Germany, the largest economy in Europe, and the Biden administration came in and undid it within a matter of weeks. Really, really unfortunate for the Ukrainians, really unfortunate for the Germans, and pretty unfortunate for the United States as well.
Sir, it's an honor and privilege to have an opportunity. It's because of people like you that I recently decided to join the military.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I just graduated from basic combat training and officer candidate school. I know that's not West Point. But we got it done. And I'm from Michigan, so go blue. But anyway, I think it's a fun question, and it's a true honor. But tell me your best story from the military. I would love to hear it. I think we would too.
I can't even tell those stories. I literally, I don't even know where to begin. I will tell you a great story. It's not a funny story particularly, but it's a great story about my time in the service. My best friends are mostly still the people that I went to school with at West Point or served with as a young lieutenant and captain. In fact, two of them, my best friends, Ulrich and Brian, came joined me at the State Department. They will never forgive me for dragging them into that mess. But here's an example of the kind of patriotism you have in America. I campaigned really hard for Marco Rubio. I had no expectation. I had no expectation I would join the Trump administration. And got a call on Sunday after the election saying, if we found the right job in the administration, would you be willing to consider it? And of course, the answer to that is, what does everybody say when somebody calls and says, would you think? Yes, you all say yes. So I said yes. That was on Sunday. On Monday, I get another call from Reince Priebus, who asked me the same question. I said, yep, if you find the right thing, I'd be happy to do it. I didn't tell my wife. I thought nothing would come of this. On Tuesday, I get a call and says, can you be at Trump Tower on Wednesday? Roger. Wasn't sure where Trump Tower was, but I knew when Wednesday was. And so I called, at this point I told my wife, I said, hey, I'm going up to interview to be the CIA director. Probably going to interview 20 people. It's nothing. So we went up, I interviewed with the president for a couple of hours. And on Thursday, he calls me and offers me the opportunity. I, of course, said yes. This all happened so fast. I didn't even have a chance. And then I get a call on Thursday afternoon after the president calls saying, we're going to announce this tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock Eastern. So from Sunday to Friday morning, I didn't even have a chance to call my best friend, a guy named Brian Bultow. So at about 8, so the announcement comes out at 8, my phone starts lighting up. We hadn't had a chance to tell anyone. And Brian calls, and I have to take this call. He's literally my 40-year friend. Hey, and he says, anything you want to tell me? And I said, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. It's a long story. Thanks for calling. He says, no, you'll be great. I'm so proud of you. This will be fantastic. I said, here's the bad news. He said, what's that? And I said, I want you to join me and be the chief operating officer. Yes. And he says, Brian says, the correct answer at that point is to hang up, right? This is the correct answer. He says, does the CIA have a chief operating officer? Which, of course, I said, I have no idea, but we're going to make it happen. Brian says, as amazing, Brian says, give me an hour. And 2 hours later, he called me back and said, I'm in, what day do I start? And I'm confident. We'd run a business together. We'd suffered in basic training together at West Point. That's the kind of people America creates in the world. You all are some of these same people who he was working at a big private equity firm in Dallas. He had lots of things in front of him, and he just said, you know what? I've got this chance. I'm gonna get. So my buddy's gonna be the CIA director. I gotta watch this. These are the kind of things that you will come to benefit from and love. And thank you for being in the military. Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for being with us here tonight. What an honor. Andy Chung, West Point, class of 2005.
Yeah. It was a lot tougher when I was there.
We are called the class of 9/11 for a reason, sir. But
you all are an amazing class. The class of 2005 is absolutely one of the most remarkable classes in the Academy's history. Bless you.
Thank you, sir. We'd like to be our generation's 86ers.
Yeah.
But what advice would you give a service member who wants to follow in your footsteps and potentially be Secretary of State?
There's no answer to that. There's no path. You can't make this happen. It just happens. The things that I've told my son his whole life. If he was up here, he'd step on stage and say, "I got it." He could repeat it. It is simply, there is no job too small to work your tail off on. None. Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter if anybody's watching. Work. Deliver. Don't let a little speed bump get in your way. Go crush it. Right? That's step one. The second one is find some joy in what you do. Every day. There are a lot of days that I'd wake up and the world, it was crushing, right? You'd read the intelligence briefing and you'd have 20 people from around the world who wanted to call and talk to you. And you'd have to prioritize which foreign ministers call you. The work was just enormous. But every day I found a moment for just something, for a little joy. Some place where I could laugh or chuckle. All right, invite Brian and Ulrich up, and they'd remind me that we were at Fort Apache. The State Department didn't really like us very much. Make sure you do that. Take a little bit of time every day. And then the last one for me is my faith is really important. I always found a moment in each day to find a little bit of time to remember that there are more important things than even the things I'm working on. There are things that are bigger than even us here in the United States. And there is this higher power, and the opportunities that I got and the work that I had needed to make sure we delivered on behalf of the United States. But in the end, I had to be confident that the work I was doing also served that greater cause as well. So I was pretty fearless about that. You can't count how many times State Department lawyers threw the penalty flag for me talking about my faith. Work hard, tell the truth, find some joy in life, and keep your faith, and good things will happen. Yeah. All right. Hang on, I'll take one more before I get the hook. Yeah, exactly. Who's got something? Yes, sir. We've got a microphone here. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Yeah.
What an honor. The question I have is, of course, I think there's no bigger threat than the Chinese Communist Party, militarily, economically. But here in the U.S., I believe that we're seeing the beginnings of a modern-day cultural revolution, and the specter of communism is trying to take hold of the younger generation, and it's silencing the traditions that our nation has been built upon. What can we do to counter and combat the specter of communism that is trying to take hold?
So I agree with just about everything you said there. My biggest fear is exactly this. I created at the State Department, this is a bit of an aside, I created at the State Department something called the Commission on Unalienable Rights. What did I do? That's a fancy name. My diplomats were traveling around the world talking about human rights in ways that you would not comprehend. It was so disconnected from who we are as Americans. So I wanted to go back and reground their efforts. We send out these cables and I'd read them and I'd think, I'm pretty sure James Madison wouldn't get this, right? And we have to remind ourselves every day and always that we are a special nation, not because we're all so darn smart or we were born any more capable than any other human being, who each are created in the image of God. We're a better nation because we have these central understandings and ideas. And I will tell you, the progressive left wants to tear those down. This is not a new phenomenon. It's at least since the 1960s. I could place it a little bit earlier, but if you'll give me the benefit of saying we're now 50 years, 5 decades on in this effort to infiltrate our schools, infiltrate our churches, infiltrate institutions of higher learning, we have to go reclaim it. And you do that not in one fell swoop. You do that inch by inch, place by place, in every place that you find yourself. You don't have to take on grandma at the Thanksgiving table, but every place else, okay? Every place else, you have to be completely unplugged about what you believe and why you believe it. Articulate and do it. You do it with a smile. Do it with joy. We don't have to. It's not mean to believe in these central understandings. And if we do that, we'll see good things happen. I've done more than 4 dozen political events since I've left office. I'm out helping candidates. Have something called MAVPAC, right from my cavalry days. Yeah, exactly. So I get to do political events again. For 4 years I couldn't. It would have been a felony. So now I get to do them again. And it has been such a blessing. I had this fellow, he was 70 years old, and he came up to me, it was in Tennessee, and he said, "I've never been to a school board meeting and I'm running for school board." I see this kind of thing all over. People running for city council, people who decided to become their county sheriff in rural places like Kingman County, Kansas, people who are just engaging in ways they hadn't before. This is how our revolution took place. Ordinary men and women stepping up to get it done. That's what's going to happen here. It's not going to be some top-down model from Washington, D.C., where some really great leader says, "It shall be." It's going to happen when people all across America say, "Enough, I'm not going to allow this to happen anymore," and they demand for themselves, for their kids and for their families and for their community. They say, "No, we're going to retake this in a way that is fundamentally consistent with what we know to be the way we treat every human being and the way that America should operate." Last thought for you before I head out. My wife reminds me that when you talk about things in national security, you can sell a lot of Xanax, right? It can be pretty depressing. You can tell tonight, I'm not depressed at all, having lived in that for 4 years. Any of you in the financial markets, any of you working, right? I am long America. If you're going to bet your money today, you should always place it on the United States. If you're going to take risk on your fellow Americans, take risk on the people in your community. I believe with all my heart that whether it's the 1619 Project or Vladimir Putin or whoever it is that wants to undermine the central things that we know to be true, that we'll beat them all. It'll be because that you all come out on a Saturday night to see an unemployed former diplomat, right? Because Americans care, and we do things like say, "I'm going to sign up and go serve for a bit," and we work, and we find joy, and we are truthful. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. Have a good night.